Becoming your own person. And what does that mean? Becoming your own person for me meant that I was not the person that felt like going to university and after that trying to fit myself into various occupation. What really happened when I started becoming my own person is I started making choices on a very granular level of when you're faced with crossroads, a turning point, a pivot, and it's in that moment where you make the decision. And maybe there is something that you're doing right now that is already the same as you are comfortable with, or that you're just doing out of complacency. But it's not a true choice, because when I went to university, it was not a true choice. It was out of comfort, it was out of complacency. And subsequently, even when I graduated, trying to fit myself into occupation, it was also out of complacency and comfort. It was always the choices that were outside of, again, the complacency and the comfort. So for me, this looked like enrolling myself in a psychotherapy program when I was like 22, right after university. And this was something that people are like, why are you going to psychotherapy? Shouldn't you just be focusing on your life and work or whatever? And I was like, no, I know in my gut that this is important for me right now, that I need to learn how to find my voice and to reclaim some kind of emotional honesty for myself. So that was actually one of my first choices that was more true for myself and a true choice, because it was aligned with someone that is actually me, like my own person, not just doing something because it's comfortable, going along with what's just easy or in front of you. And time and again, there would be choices that I would be presented with that would take me out of that complacency and comfort, because I made the choice to do that. Another one was in 2012, when I was faced with the choice of that I made the choice to go on a 10-day Vipassana meditation retreat. Now, at the time, I was in full-time employment, but I sought something beyond within. I sought something silent. Like I sought silence, like more meaning, more spirituality in a sense. At that time, I was like 24. I'd never really been someone who would consider myself into yoga or meditation or whatnot. Silence was not really something I was comfortable with, if you will. So in that time that I chose the 10-day Vipassana meditation retreat, and I didn't even ask permission. I just told my employer, I have this 2-week trip that I have to go on, whatnot. So that was choice number 2, that was not about complacency or comfort, but was a true choice because it was something from within calling me. And I made that choice outside of my comfort zone at the time. And then a third choice was when, after several different types of employment, and I just couldn't seem to stick with anyone, I just kept cycling out of employment. I think the longest one I'd ever been in was 8 months. I chose this 100% commission sales job, and it was door-to-door sales. And this was also out of my comfort zone, and not in that same sense of complacency. You just go and, maybe you just have a wage or a salary, whatever, and it's a very passive type of thing. So this 100% sales commission, door-to-door sales job was choice number 3. That was more of a true choice because it took me out of a complacency and a sense of comfort. And it was also something that, all the signs were there, all of the signs were pointing towards it, but I was still kind of fitting the mold of what was easier, or what looked like I was almost just settling. I was like, oh, well, it's easier to just get a job or just to go and do something for a paycheck or something. But there's, every single time it's I wouldn't last in them because they always felt so tedious. Or with the meditation retreat, I would be led to something beyond. And then I would almost be I have to go on a trip. And then when I came back, I wasn't the same person. So I couldn't even continue it anymore. I was like, no. So at some point I cycled out of these more passive, labor type of employment. And I was like, I put myself outside of my comfort zone, out of that zone of complacency, and I became, you could call it an independent contractor, and then took myself out of that comfort zone physically and obviously in terms of having to go door to door and like do that and be 100% commission based. So that was definitely a true choice, a choice that was more true and aligned with who I was becoming and like who I really actually wanted to become. And it actually grew a lot of my sense of independence, my confidence, my sense of cause and effect, like that I am the determinant of, what I choose to do. And this was actually kind of like these three choices led to like this foundation of like I became a lot more physically fit. I became a lot more, you could call it like the driver in my own in the seat, like the driver of my own vehicle kind of thing. And I started relying less on like, oh, what do other people think? Have other people make the choice, of doing the default choice. And so this was like from the period of time I was 17 to 27, from the time where, I just went to university because it's the thing you do. And it's just like the complacent and the comfortable choice to do. And then I started making new decisions. And the choices I made became more true for me. This is really what happened just before I went on that one-way train ride at 27, because what changed from 17 to 27? At 17, when I heard the voice go travel, and I didn't make that choice. I didn't make that choice that was true to me, that was already calling me at that time. I heard the whisper, I heard the call. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't even have I wasn't a match to the person who could do that. I hadn't built up, maybe the independent state, the sense of making choices for myself, of making the choice outside of complacency and comfort. Even like the more like the greater sense of emotional honesty that was required. So this is really what happened. I spent 5 years in university, and I think internally I made a decision that like, yeah, I was kind of just doing this thing that I'm like, well, yeah, I guess I could just do the degree. And during that time, I think I made an internal decision because I was like, this is not really my choice. And I could feel that dissonance within me, although I was still kind of going through the motions just to complete it and to be like, okay, yeah, it's probably smart to do. Okay, just do it anyway. It was not a true choice for me. So when I talk about true choices, it's all of the components really that leads you to saying yes to who you really are at core and to being your own person. This is really where the story that led to like all the countries that I've traveled. And, at 27, when I said yes to the one-way train ride, it wasn't even about travel. I didn't know what that would lead to. I just said yes to the one-way train ride because obviously now, knowing what happened at 17 and what I, essentially for a decade was kind of the same pattern happening where I would be trying to fit myself into these boxes or to these, these making these decisions that weren't really coming from who I really was, until like there were like these pivotal moments where I started making these more true choices, going to psychotherapy, unlocking more of my own perspective and voice, what I really think about things. And then the Vipassana meditation retreat, getting into that stillness and that silence within. And then that evolved, like that took me out of many of the complacency of like many of the occupational roles that I would be in. And then that led to me, being suddenly like, oh, I would do door-to-door sales. It's 100% commission-based. Like that takes a lot of self-trust. That takes a lot more of a certain independence, confidence, assertiveness. So this was all being built in that decade before I ever said yes to the one-way train ride. But then kicked off like this series of journeys that then unfolded in like 3 months of travel, 6 months of travel, a year of travel. And then essentially it just became a lifestyle. Like it became like, so that was 2015, 2016 is really when I went on this new trajectory of living outside of what I thought I should do and started listening more to that inner compass. And what does that actually mean? What does it mean to listen to your inner compass? It's about making the choice that is actually aligned with who you are. It's when you get a thought or a call and you know what to, like not just know what to do with it, but you are able to become that person that can say yes to it. You know, the journey still unfolds. Like, you still let the story write itself, but at least you have now the inner identity where you are able to say yes in the moment that it counts, because it's a choice that takes place when you're no longer operating from complacency and comfort. And every pivotal moment or choice that has kind of, you know, I always think of, like, there's like this plateau where you're just kind of bopping around doing day-to-day life or whatnot, and maybe there's not a lot of growth or change or internal things, and then suddenly there's like this one pivotal moment where suddenly you do something so out of your comfort zone, or like that changes the trajectory of everything. I think about the psychotherapy. I think about the of Vipassana retreat. I think about the 100% commission sales job. These were three pivotal moments during that period of time after graduating university, where I really said yes to the version of myself that was wanting to come through, hence let the story write itself. This is where your true choice emerges, because so often it's not about the thing itself, it's about the choice that you made at any given moment that determines who you are actually being and the path that you take and the trajectory. So even now, like, just say a decade later, and I'm like building the Sarah Fair Conservatory. So it's like now it's even like a new yes. It's like, yes, I'm going to, you know, see myself maybe as a, not just a business owner, but like using my story or like creating something from my story, you know, it's still like information, but it's this choice that, like, you know, I'm currently in Costa Rica. I'm at a freaking hotel, or it's not even a hotel, it's like a reserve, and it costs $13.50 US a night. I'm not really, this is not exactly something that I'm just doing on the regular. This is definitely outside of my comfort zone and takes me a little bit outside of that complacency. And there's something in that, because every time that you change or you evolve or you grow, or even you could even think of it as simply making the choice that is more who you really are. This is where what it comes down to. It's not even about the thing itself. For me, it wasn't about that decade of travel. For me, it wasn't about necessarily the train ride or the destination, or, you know, the places, the sightseeing or whatever it is. The whole core and the story and the journey of that was really about saying yes to that choice. The moment when you're presented with, you know, a fork in the road moment, a crossroads, a point in time where you're being asked to, you know, choose who are you going to be. This is like the crux. This is like the moment where in that choice, it may be so subtle that, you know, like, how often do you actually like highlight where that choice is? And when you have that choice, what did you actually do? Because what happened to me in the 5 years when I was in university, and during that whole 5 years, I just completed the degree. Every single day and like moment when I ever had that voice calling me, like, just withdraw. This is not your path. Just take a year off. Go travel. Just stop this nonsense. Just listen to your heart, essentially. So that dissonance that I felt within was not like this fantastical kind of, like, you know, it can feel something like, you know, sometimes you can't believe what you feel. I don't know if you are someone like that, but sometimes, do you trust yourself? Do you trust the feelings that you get? So sometimes, like, it may be in those moments where you are, in fact, in every moment making a choice. And if you feel a certain dissonance, or you know that there's something calling you forward, but you're simply acting out of complacency or even just comfort, this is not a true choice. And I know this so well, because for that whole 5 years, and even I would say the 5 years after graduating, when I was still kind of like, even though I was like, there were pivotal times, like maybe like the four that I just mentioned in that time, like 5 years time, for a lot of it, I was still trying to like fit myself into a certain, trying to still fit myself into certain ways of being. And I recognize that at the most granular level, it was really about what choice was I actually making at the core, like at the center of it all. And I did make those choices. I did make those choices because I decided to go to the psychotherapy. I decided to go to the Vipassana. I decided to go to do the door-to-door sales. I decided to do the one-way train ride. So when I look back, I'm like, actually, I made a lot of good choices. I made a lot of choices more aligned with myself. It wasn't that just suddenly like something just happened or something. It's like there was a choice that actually happened in that process. And this was where the evolution came in, where I became someone new. It was like a stacking, right? Because first came the emotional honesty. How do I truly feel about this? And then later on, I started going more into like a certain stillness or like a higher power, like spirituality. And then that's where I guess it really developed my own sense of self-trust. And that's where I leaned on, where I could now trust, like, hey, how did I go and do like door-to-door sales? Like that actually was pretty courageous for me because I was quite scared. I was not just scared, like I actually didn't want to show up. But for some reason, this internal call was like, and I also knew that I couldn't just go and do like the wage or salary type of thing. I was just so tedious to me. I was so bored to tears kind of thing, essentially. And that's another story where I could go into this whole topic another time. Essentially, what happened is I became a match to the person who could say yes to the one-way train. And that led to me becoming more of myself in that decade, where I was just like on a series of one-way journeys, more nomadic, more free-flowing, more in that state of trust and surrender, and letting the story write itself, right? Letting it all unfold of its own accord. And this is where I really realized, I'm like, I'm just being my own person now. I'm not trying to fit myself into what I think I should be. And so it was a choice of not acting from like what's already, what's just convenient, what's just comfortable, what's already, what already is, but actually taking when there's something new that presents itself, like that new choice, that you are able to, in that moment, recognize what it is for what it is. So essentially, this is what it means to take your life to the level where you get to be who you simply are. And you feel that sense where you're no longer fighting with yourself, if you will, and you unlock a certain abundance because you're no longer suppressing parts of yourself that are like vital to your very expression and being. So if there's a decision, I mean, it's not even that you have to think about the decision. If there's like something within you that you're just wondering, that's been like, you've been mulling it maybe in your mind and there's like a choice around it. And maybe it's like you're not even thinking about it as a choice. You just something that's like calling you repeatedly, or it's like in the back of your mind. You ever have that feeling where, there's something on your heart, there's something that your soul is calling you to, but you're just for some reason like delaying it, or you're just hushing it. It's just kind of like it's just getting drowned out by the day-to-day things, and so you're just kind of putting it off. That's like literally my 5 years in university. The voice was always there, but I never actually acted on it. I never actually made the decision. Yeah, okay, it was a decision, like a default decision, because by not making an actual choice, I was just defaulting to what was already comfortable, when I was already complacent, just going, it was like this low level kind of like being subdued within. And yes, I did complete the degree. So sometimes it's out of that contrast where sometimes you do something for so long that, for me, what happened is that the contrast from that experience became almost this point where internally I made the decision. I'm like, I am not going to allow this. Like, I'm not going to allow other people to make choices for me anymore. Like, I am not going to be in situations where I don't feel like I chose this, if that makes sense. So I think that internal decision was quite strong because I never felt like university was a true choice for me. It was a convenient choice. It was a comfortable choice. It was a complacent choice. And if you're operating from one or all of these variables, complacency, comfort, convenience, chances are you're not making a true choice. You are simply going along with outside voices. And in that situation, you are not being fully who you are. You're not being your own person. And you are experiencing a whole bunch of different sorts of dissonance. You might be struggling against yourself within, knowing that you actually want to do one thing, but you're still action-wise doing something else. So this is where let the story write itself. And that whole methodology that I now kind of just live within, where it's like making choices that are more aligned with where I'm going rather than just what's comfortable or keeps me in a state of complacency, or even it's just plain just convenient, right? So, when you ask, like, what do you really want? At the core of it, it's to be it's who you're called to be in this life. But you don't necessarily know what that is. You only know what you're being called to. Those are like it's like the breadcrumb trail, right? It's like the inkling, it's like the nudges, it's like the intuition. And so when it comes down to it, it's like you only have your choice to go with, your true choice, because on the very granular level, you're either making choices in alignment with who you really are, or you're defaulting to what's easy. And the irony is that when you actually make the true choice, you actually feel a sense of greater ease, inner peace, alignment within. It just feels, it feels uncomfortable at first, obviously, but that's the illusion of comfort. You feel like it's easy because it's comfortable, but the true ease actually happens when you choose what's more aligned, even if it's outside your comfort zone. And then you experience a certain, like a wavelength of like peace and synchronicity. And that's what a true choice really is. So if there's something that you have on your mind, or just like that's been hovering in the background for some reason, or that you're at a certain turning point, or there's like a pivot or a crossroads presenting itself in your life right now, and that there's a certain choice that you have to make, or that you are presented with making, or that you could be making, and you're just delaying it for some reason, or you're simply defaulting to what is just, what is already comfortable, or, easy, convenient. It's like just out of complacency. Then this is what you can DM me with, message me, and tell me what that true choice would be for you. What would be what is the thing that you are being called to? And I will help you decipher what your true choice in that moment would actually be. Because it really comes down to, it's not about like the big lofty type of like, oh, you have this big goal and whatever, but how do you actually do it? It's not even about the goal per se. It's all about the process. And the process really comes down to, at any given moment, are you making choices in alignment with who you truly are, or are you defaulting to what already is? That's really what it comes to at core. And this is what let the story write itself helps you decipher and uncover, so that your trajectory will follow according to the choices that you make now, in the future. And they might seem, whether big or small, it never feels quite that big in the moment. It's often something that just comes in quietly, but you make that decision. You don't just make the decision, you follow through on the actions as a result of the decision. So this is what you would DM me for right now, with what is this true choice that is presenting itself to you right now? And I will help you decipher a pathway and actually follow through on what is presenting itself to you in your life right now. Because the other alternative is that you just delay, or you just live with that subdued notion of like, yeah, there's something else calling me, but I'm not, it's outside of my comfort zone to actually go for it. So I already lived that for a number of years. And actually that was almost like preparation for who I would become. It's almost like this period of time where you experience a certain level of contrast, so that you can become someone who understands the difference. Sometimes they say, like, how can you have the experience of what is good unless you have the experience of what is bad, so to speak. So this is what I'm uniquely positioned to help you with, because I've lived through it myself. And it's something that I've, not just lived through that first decade, but also then embodied a new way of being, where I became more embodied in the surrender and the flow as a result of that one-way train ride. That was already the accumulation, like the stacking of a number of choices I made prior to that. So DM me with what is a true choice you are faced with right now. What is calling you, and what particular choice are you feeling called to that maybe you're not quite truly aligning with just yet? So send me a message and we'll go from there.